the Department of Educational and Counseling Psychology at McGill University. She also served for 7 years as the Graduate Program Director in Inclusive Education and has recently served as the chair of the Social Inclusion Working Group for the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences Autism Assessment for a National Autism Strategy. Sarah is the Director of SPARK, Social Policy Advocacy Research Community, a research team whose mandate is to promote social inclusion by emphasizing self-determination, community, and participatory approaches to research and practice. Her scholarly interests and research grants are in the areas of social inclusion, inclusive employment, transition from school to the community, self-determination, and quality of life among individuals from disability and other equity-seeking groups. So it's my great pleasure to welcome Tara Flanagan. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It's really hard to follow such a cute presenter. I'm of course talking about the baby. I wouldn't comment on Emily's cuteness. Be highly inappropriate. So thank you very much for inviting me today. Thank you to the Living Lab team, to TACC, Martine, Emily, Thomas, Alain, everybody here for being here. I'm really excited to be able to talk to you today about some really important pieces that I've put together and called my talk Weaving the Maps of Autistic Lifetimes, What Research Reveals About Milestones and Pathways. And just as we start, I want us to be thinking about these notions of milestones and pathways. The way I was thinking about them for this talk were really that the milestones are transitions, essentially a change of state, and pathways being stories. And so you'll see more of that as I go along.
You muted yourself, Tara, on the Teams call.
Okay, are we good now?
Good.
Okay, I was joking that I'm an early nerd, and I was here an extra 45 minutes early, but it ended up being very useful to get the technology organized. So I want to start with a land and beast appreciation. I do all of my thinking, all of my work really in Boucherville, where I live, and it's located on the water and in unceded territory. My pondering pal, Mishka, has given me the opportunity every day for 2 hours to be thinking things through. And this presentation is no different. So I wanted to acknowledge the land and my support that I get from Mishka to be able to think things through. Speaking of which, one of my inspirations for this talk is Carole King's song Tapestry. And as I was walking and thinking about this talk over a period of time, of course, this came to me, and I realized that I've pretty much had a lifetime of pondering about life as a tapestry. This album I owned first on 8-track from my dad, then on vinyl, which I played in my bedroom, then on cassette, which I played over and over when I was driving to work in my 1981 Buick Century, then on CD, and now on, of course, a digital format. And essentially the quote here, "My life has been a tapestry of rich and royal hue, an everlasting vision of the ever-changing view, a wondrous woven magic in hits of blue and gold, a tapestry to feel and see, impossible to hold." And what I wanted to capture in this is really this notion of the depth, the magic, the fullness of life, and in many ways, how this often is very constrained and by a system that is inaccessible for many people, including autistic people. And today, I want you to be thinking about your rich tapestry of life and all of the tapestries that come to intersect with yours. So many of us have worked in the field for a very long time, myself included. I've at this point taught, more than 1,000 students, and those intersections of thread where your lifeline, the thread of your life is intersecting with the thread of another is really important to think about what that impact is. And, the opportunity to make sure that people have their full lives and are viewed as whole people in our offerings, whatever those might be. So, as was mentioned, I work at McGill. I have wonderful students. I've graduated many students over the period of time that I've been at McGill since 2007. I have been working in the field of disability for 30 years. I find it to be a great joy. I have interests in the areas of accessibility, empowerment, have worked in different administrative positions, and I volunteer in a variety of places as well, all around my area of interest. And with our concept of tapestries and weaving, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about myself. So I'm going to share with you my career life map. This, of course, begins at inception, at the start, where it is at least a tale that's been told many times that I was born a nerd. I continue to live as one. My mother, who talked about wanting a docile baby who would snuggle and be rocked, didn't get that baby. Instead, got a baby who, when I could move, I moved. I dragged myself around. I checked everything out. I was extremely active. I also, by the age of 1.5 years, required a head-to-toe mud suit. Not the frilly dresses that were intended for me. So also as part of that, I spent, it was the 1980s. I guess I just need to preface things with that. And I spent a lot of time in the forest. I was a student of the forest. I would climb trees. I had a particular tree that was my favorite that essentially had a seat way up near the leaves where I would drag my books up and I would read. I would eat crab apples. I would make sure to only eat the ones that had an exit hole from the worms, if people know, and I would spend time with the plants and with the animals, and I would spend my whole day engaging with that kind of learning. I through trial and error learned a lot about what you can eat, what you can do, and to this day, as I mentioned with my land appreciation, connection to the land is very important to me. Spending my time walking and thinking and with animals. Then, as you can imagine, my love of books was very strong. I was a voracious reader. I read everything in the house. And in my community, we didn't have a library, and we had a bookmobile. And to my knowledge, I was the only customer at 8. And I would run home from school, go to the bookmobile, spend my time with the bookmobile librarian, and we had a whole relationship going. I would leave with, mountains of books and read them all during the week and then bring them back the next week. At some point, my bookmobile, I guess probably due to lack of interest and only one customer being enthusiastic, they canceled the program, and I was left with my Pippi Longstocking Sails the Seven Seas book that I was worried police would come and find me for not returning and stealing for many years. And next is this strange one, I suppose, guided by Anne of Green Gables. So I was born in Moncton. I was, your basic maritimer, I guess, loved Anne of Green Gables. I was the first person in my family to go to university, and I learned about university on Anne of Green Gables. And so this was so exciting. I didn't know what scholarships were. I didn't know what Anne Shirley and Gilbert Blythe were doing to get a scholarship, where they were going, what this place was where it seemed like all you did was read books, raise your hand, and no answers, which I loved all of those things. So I was on a mission to figure out how to get there, to figure out what this university piece was. And with the help of other librarians at high school, I was able to figure that out, and enrolled as a student at the University of Winnipeg in occupational therapy, but I fell in love with my psychology class and then switched majors. At that time, I also was working at a gas station near a group home where there were 6 residents who had developmental disabilities, and developed a relationship while they were, stopping in, getting a coffee in the morning on their way to work. And I got up the courage to ask if there were a position available, and there was, and I got 6 hugs at the door, and that's how I got my first career job, which was as a support worker at Covenant Home. And a lot of the things I'm going to be talking to you about today are really coming full circle now in 2026 in terms of person-centered planning and mapping. I had the opportunity to work with these tools at that time. And that brings me to today, working as a prof, living my passion. I absolutely love what I do. I love to, be at the university. It did not disappoint from Anne of Green Gables, I do have to say. I love to be able to have the opportunity to learn every day, engage in great conversations, and these are the things that that really help to move me forward. So that is my career life map. And I just wanted to throw this out there, obviously evidence of nerdiness. So if you were tasked to create an educational or intervention plan for me, which would be more useful, my professional bio or my career life map, based on what you just heard? Would you have more direction on one over the other? Any sense there? Oh, yeah. And can you think of why? Or do you have a sense of an activity that you would set up for me right away? Oh, yeah, teaching. Yes, that's true. I do. Yes, I love to teach my younger sister and be the boss of my younger sister, as you can see here. But definitely, so to me, the life story pieces, you get far more information that's personalized, that's related to motivation, empowerment, who somebody really is at the essence. And, I would hope people would set me up somewhere on a patch of grass with a book, maybe with some, interesting, problem to solve, something along those lines. And I want us to be able to think that this piece of narrative information, the expertise that we get from the stories that people tell, their life stories, are really crucial. So I'm going to move to talk about a few milestones, as I mentioned, transitions, ones that we see are pretty typical in this field. and they're, of course, for time's sake, not not elaborated as they could be. But one of the milestones that that many people encounter, and at different life stages, is a diagnosis. And I put up a quote here from Alice Wong, who unfortunately passed away last semester, but who was a fierce disability rights advocate, who had a project called Disability Visibility, where she highlighted people's life stories, their narratives, and talked about this first-person expertise and how important it was. And I want to highlight the study here about the adult experience of being diagnosed, and this being a qualitative meta-analysis, but really wanted to ensure that this nuance also gets captured when we're talking about disability as socio-political, cultural, biological. It's many things. It's highly nuanced, and the experience of it is far more important than the data surrounding it, and other pieces. So for me, that again is the thread moving throughout, is the opportunity for people to tell their stories about these milestones and how those pathways really help to move us forward. So in general, with this study, they were looking at the narratives of people prior to diagnosis and after diagnosis, and how these were impactful in their lives. So we can see prior to diagnosis, people talked about viewing themselves as different, masking, pretending to be quote unquote normal, thinking about diagnosis, a lot of anxiety surrounding the potential diagnosis, and then a sense of relief after the opportunity. I think that's really important, is to connect with others, especially people who have similar identities, and diagnosis leading to relief. Also, self-understanding is a really big piece when we're talking about self-determination and life stories. So this is a little bit of a snippet of the milestones, and the importance of first-person accounts and thinking about these. One of these first-person accounts comes from this study, looking at lived experience of everyday health and well-being indicators of autistic women and gender diverse people. And here, again, a qualitative design looking at these experiences and the different themes, focusing on all the things that you have to do to get through life. So sort of the drudgery, how things can be really difficult, particularly of focus for us, and where we are able to have some agency, is living in a world that's not about us. So the fastest way to make sure that the world can be about us is to hold space and hear people's stories, be able to listen, and that as a first step. So the notion that there's a lot more pressure to meet expectations, that was also something that came from the previous one. And trying to fit in comes at a tremendous cost. So there's a lot of emotional labor, often mental health outcomes as well, and making sure that that we're holding space and creating practices where these firsthand accounts are really supported. An example of this this coming to light is this study from Pelicano and colleagues. I'm very excited by this because the purpose of this was actually to tell life stories. Many of the other pieces, the other articles that I'm talking about today, really were focused on, future planning, needs assessments, things like that. But this really was focused on telling stories, and in particular, having autistic people tell stories to each other, tell their life stories to each other. And one of the quotes that was really important around that sense of community and identity, is the real understanding of how it feels on all levels, physically, emotionally, psychologically, I think can sadly only be fully appreciated by another autistic person. Unless you've actually lived through it, it can be hard to comprehend the impact that it has on your whole being. It was wonderful to speak with somebody who completely gets that. So you can also see with the themes, the affordances of an autistic space. Obviously, Giant Steps is wonderful at creating that kind of space, identity-centered, neuro-inclusive kind of space. Another theme, again, that really mirrored some of the previous work, was that sharing life stories takes a toll. You know, when you're talking about difficult things that have happened, even if you know, you're getting support through that, it certainly takes a toll. However, it was acknowledged that it was worth it. It was worth it because of the healing that came, because of the connection that came, because of the community that came afterward. So engaging in this process can certainly lead to healing. And research and as advocacy, I think, especially for the researchers on this call, it's really important for us to take stock of how we ask questions, the different methodologies we use, and to see where there are some places where we can offer more space, time, support for lived experiences, and in particular, life stories. I know, for example, in one of my group studies, we were focused on co-construction of inclusive workplace infographics, and just the opportunity for people to come together to talk about something that wasn't necessarily about life stories became an opportunity to connect and to create community, and it is really something that is missing for a lot of people. Another example, and good news, we have many TACC people on this one, another example of a neuro-inclusive approach to having these open-ended questions, to learning about autistic people's lives, is this one here that focused on asking about autistic youth's future, and also focused on making sure that there were some accessibility pieces built in. So a methodology that from the start had built-in inclusion. I really appreciated that. I'll start by highlighting the quote that I thought was absolutely fantastic, because it was juxtaposed with a lot of the things that I've experienced. So here you have we're talking about future goals. Participant, I want to live in a cinema. And the interviewer, you want to live in a house or you want to live in a cinema? So the participant said Cineplex. You want to live in Cineplex so you can watch all the movies. What do you want to do? Build a cinema. You want to build a cinema? Yes. Oh, cool. What would you put in the cinema? How many theaters would you have? And the participant went on to talk about the different kinds of things. Now, oftentimes in these kinds of meetings, and I've seen these many times, so I've been a part of many person-centered planning and different kinds of future-oriented things. Oftentimes, what the participant is told as soon as something like this is, I want to live in a cinema, they're told, you can't live in a cinema. People live in houses, people live in apartments, people don't live in cinemas. What I really appreciated about this was continuing to ask open-ended questions to really get to what the essence of the excitement about living in a cinema is. So it seems like it has more to do with multiple screens, really good sound system, maybe a really good visual system. So being able to recreate the things that were actually really exciting, but potentially in a home theater, or even in a corner with really great headphones, or whatever the case might be, instead of shutting this down and then not getting at what was actually exciting, they went further. And this is exactly the kind of thing that I wanted to talk about today with regard to life stories. So follow that excitement, follow the story that somebody's telling you. Sorry. This is just an example also of the methodology that they put forward. So they really highlighted accessibility right from the start, made sure to have visual supports, and many ways of responding, and particularly with those who required, for example, fewer options in terms of, what are the two things that you like most? What are the two things that you like least, as opposed to trying to, come up with these from thin air. So really good examples, I think, of putting these in place, and particularly of being able to support people in telling their stories in a variety of different ways. So there are so many different ways to be able to tell these stories, and to have your life and the things you really care about and who you are at the core, like the person who was so excited about the different components of cinema. Next, just very briefly, I wanted to highlight a couple of studies that maybe demonstrate that we still have some work to do. Some recent studies looking at the different tools that we use in research, but also in practice. Unfortunately, the accessibility is rarely considered. First-person accounts are also rarely solicited, and there tends to be a lack of systemization and consistency with regard to the way that we put things forward. So making sure that there's a need to have the person be the driver, that there's assessments of preferences, supports, plans that are in place where there's some oversight also regarding those, especially to ensure that they're being implemented, and that the person's story is really being well supported. And a couple of others similar talk about person-centered planning, and essentially how when these are being implemented, so I'm sure many of you are implementing these, what tends to be implemented is the planning part, not necessarily the person-centered part. Or if the person-centered part is implemented, it is a little bit more surface. So, and again, done in a way that lacks consistency. These would be the pieces that are really important to consider. I'm going to show you a couple of tools that can help guide you, but more than anything, your reflection on your own life story, your own lifelines, and how they intersect, I think, can help guide you to really have an idea of where you'd like to go with these notions. Another piece, and there's been a proliferation of quality of life research in the last decade, and that's very exciting. Yet at the same time, we still have the largest, percentage of respondents are proxy respondents, so parents or teachers or others. We still have a small number of qualitative research methodologies. So first-person accounts are also rare, and unfortunately, very few accommodations are put forward. So the kinds of accommodations and the care that was put into the previous example, we're really not seeing as the norm in the research in general. So I wanted to provide an opportunity for us to think about moving forward in a practical way. And my view is really that this is something that we can be implementing into our lives as teachers, as therapists, as researchers, as citizens out in the world. So thinking about being guided by the person-centered piece, the story, the life story of the person, the humanity essentially of the person we're interacting with. So person-centered planning is really a values-based practice. So again, it's very important to do some reflection, thinking about what your values are and how you want those to be implemented. Really focused on a social model of disability. So more about how we can have an impact on ensuring that the environment is supportive of everybody. And for me, the biggest piece that I wanted to talk about is dignity. So dignity is built in when we talk about universal design. So that's the dignity of making sure that a physical space is able to have the widest number of users as possible. So ramps for wheelchair users, stroller users, etc. And in universal design for learning, dignity is around, again, accessing those learning opportunities, the curriculum, the activities, the human right to be able to be educated in our society. I also want to suggest that part of dignity in this case is being able to talk about your life, tell your story, and have people have space for that, listen to that, not have it be a judgment or rushing to turn it into to something, those kinds of things can be wonderful and a wonderful next step, but the dignity of holding space for people to hear who they are and holding dignity for yourself to be able to do the same thing. There are a couple of tools that do exist. I'll just go over these quickly. And there's this one. The first one is MAPS, and this one is life story based. So this is the driver essentially here is the person's story. So it's not. We often start, again, as I mentioned, we start with the planning. We're like, yes, let's get some goals, some objectives. What about SMART goals? Our curriculum says this. What are the goals we need for that? And I'm suggesting that we kind of take a step back, and it's okay to have goals, obviously, and to be working on meeting criteria, thinking about moving forward in milestones. Yet the entry point here is a person's story. And again, there are different ways of accessing a person's story, depending on their age, depending on abilities, depending on the things they're interested in. So thinking about this again as the rich tapestry of strengths. Something I also want to highlight is part of this is their dreams and their nightmares. So these nightmares would be fears, okay? Oftentimes when we're doing person-centered planning, the person who is helping us plan is putting their fears in there. That's not the place for their fears. It's the place for the person's fears. The person who may be having fears, maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a teacher, for the other person, it's okay to have those fears. That is to be expected, but those go in their life map. So that's to be explored in their own life map. So why would I, for example, be fearful that my child won't have a friendship group? So that's something to explore in my own life map. And so that's one of the things that I think there's a nuance there sometimes that gets missed. So that piece is really important. What are their fears? And again, when you go through this process, you're seeing things and learning a lot. And when you go through the process for yourself, and I encourage people to do that, that's my last slide. I think you get to learn a lot. This just gives you an example of that, played out a little bit. So again, the life story is the most important piece. And then, you're moving toward action after that. Another model that is widely used is called PATH. And here it's not the life story that's a driver, but a dream that's a driver. So you're having your North Star dream, the biggest dream you can dream about your life. And then you work backwards. And so then you're kind of making that more realistic. I had a therapist back in the day tell me, it was a bit of a diss, I think, but told me that my dreams were very realistic. So I don't know if it's just because I'm a product of this job or what, but so to dream the biggest dreams, but then you're working backwards and having people help support you to think about what those look like in more realistic terms. So the example of the cinema might be, my big dream is to live in a cinema. Let's get a list of the things that you love about the cinema, and let's find a way to incorporate that into your life, and have a home cinema or another approach. Here also, the accountability structures are really important. And for all of these, you need good facilitators who really can hold space and have their values in check. There are 8 steps here, and again, these are things that that you can take a look at if ever it's of interest to you. And I can make my slides available to you. I'm sure everybody wants a copy of my career path. But so you have these, starting with the dream, coming to clear actions and responsibilities. Who is part of this? You're engaging your social network as well. And this is what this kind of thing can look like. There's a lot of different ways to do that. It can be computer generated. It could be like an infographic like I did. There's a lot of different ways of getting at that. There are also so many ways, and I wouldn't want you to think about using a tool that doesn't quite work for you. I think creativity also is of importance here. This timeline, life event map, this is an approach where people map out, the positive, the negative, the neutral things in their life. You can also, at each point, think about all the through lines of the people who were involved. Ask yourself the question about what exactly, like with the cinema example, what exactly was the experience here? And it gives you a lot of information as well about, if there are many experiences that are deemed negative, what are some ways to be able to help heal some of those, maybe to move to a different place where there are more opportunities. But the sky's the limit in terms of that. I wanted to end by highlighting a few of my amazing students and some of the work that went into this thinking today. So I have a couple of current students who Kelly and Anna, who are doing work directly related. I have other students who've done work that has been very supportive. And I really wanted to end with kudos to Giant Steps and for really taking this life map, life story approach to creation, to building. And this, I think, is evidenced by Anne Crabtree, the Giant Steps ambassador, whose life story has been told and has been valued, has been amplified, and has gone to create neuro-inclusive, welcoming spaces for other autistic people, focused on play, gone into the design of the play spaces here at Giant Steps. And I feel that it's really just a tremendous example of honoring the life stories of autistic people that I think we should be focused on today. So I want to thank the Living Lab team here, TACC, Spark, especially all of you. And just to give you a quick sense, I also gave you an extra bit of homework if ever you want to, some things to reflect upon, and then to, use the mapping exercise for your own life as a way into thinking about using this for others, self-compassion, compassion for others, and I'm able to make that available. I'm sure my team can help me out with that. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Tara. So I think the idea is that we'll take questions first from the people that are attending online, and then we can finish the team's call once the questions online are finished, and then from there we'll leave the folks that are there in person to continue the discussions. So thank you very much, Tara. And so maybe for the people that are in person, you can just repeat the question back because they won't necessarily hear.
I think everybody can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. So I see Andre Delaire's hand up. So Andre, you can unmute yourself and go ahead.
Yes. Hi, Tara. I'm just wondering, this was a great presentation, by the way. How do you do this with an autistic person who is minimally verbal and has an intellectual disability? In my case, I have an 18-year-old who's attending Giant Steps, and I'm starting to plan for the future. And one of the big questions that I have is, where does she want to live? Does she want to be more in a city setting or a country setting? And I try to sort of ask questions, but I get different answers. And obviously this is an important question to be able to plan for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like you're already, engaging in that kind of experimentation, which is good. So if you have the chance to be able to go stay in a country setting, go stay in a city setting, go visit a family friend at an apartment, or those kinds of things, and use that opportunity. I'm not sure if your child.
We do that. We have a place in the country and we have a place in the city, and I can't figure out. I know where I'm happiest, but as you said, don't want to project what I'm thinking, and I just can't figure it out.
Yeah, and have in terms of figuring out other kinds of preferences and likes and dislikes, have you been successful to figure that out, let's say, between different meals, different things?
Yes.
And okay, so I would try to set up a similar, at least to start, if it's mostly between 2 or 3 things, to be able to set up a likes and dislikes. Maybe I would also build up. Maybe it might be, maybe you want to set up likes and dislikes of different rooms, and maybe kind of analyze a little bit about what that might look like. I don't, depending on abilities as well. I think a great question to ask is, in your life, what would you consider as the best day so far? So this might be a question that's a bit too advanced. I'm not sure, but it might be on days where you notice, oh, I noticed you did this or this, which I know means that you're really having a good time. Does that mean you're having a good time? Did you like this today? And trying to build up a bank of what those are, and then moving toward kind of the bigger questions, because it's true that those big questions are really overwhelming, and I think for everybody as well. And I didn't obviously talk about the context that we're in, but the context that we're in for everybody is like these questions are hard to figure out, and being able to have the support and opportunity to try things out, I guess, is where the risks aren't as high, because I think some of the fears comes from worry that your child in the future may not be supported or happy in where they live. And so I think sometimes it's like a projection into the future of, and did I do everything I could? And it sounds like you are.
Thank you.
Tara, if I could add, there's a really great research project that's just getting started at in the Living Lab, where they're using a photo methodology on, and it's a different project. It's on perspectives on friendship. But, I think even just sorting photos into, like and don't like piles, I think there's different methodologies that use different supports for communication that I think could also be interesting for starting to establish those, preferences on more complex things beyond,
Okay,
I
thanks.
think Bianca was next.
Oh, yes, great.
Hi, Tara. Thanks again for tapping on practice-based also methods. As I was myself involved back in a couple of years in mapping and supporting adults, navigating their daily lives as a social worker. So my question is actually more focused on for professional workers. You've given us a lot of examples and tools and whatnot, but I still see a lot of and I will talk in my own field, social workers that aren't really aware, of these methods and whatnot. So I was wondering if you would know any, besides the ones that we are all in, but any group resources, any, I don't know, continuing classes or courses and whatnot. I get a lot of questions from my colleagues, where can I go and learn more about these methods, especially, lest we forget that most of these methods are in the Anglo, English communities. I've been trained in person-centered, but it wasn't back in Ontario, and most of the resources were in English. So anyway, that's pretty much, I would say, my question. I humbly shared one resource that I work with for a community organization that might answer maybe Andre's interest in using different tools, helping our young youths or young adults transitioning into their own place. So this is just one example, and it's a bit dated, but we need a lot of more French resources, I would say, Tara. So I don't know if you have.
I definitely agree, and it's one of the things, I'm maybe a bit of a broken record sometimes at meetings. I always ask about, representation, self-determination, making sure that the people, who should be weighing in and guiding are the